Good morning, everyone, and welcome to New York. Welcome to our house, our greenhouse. Welcome to Deloitte. I'd like to start by thanking all of our esteemed speakers this morning. Josh, thank you for coming. Walter, thank you. David, thank you. And Andrew, thank you. It's a pleasure, privilege, and honor to have all of you here. And we're looking forward to an enjoyable day discussing innovation with you. I'll be brief. I'm Rajiv Ranaki. I lead innovation for healthcare for Deloitte. And looking forward to a great day today. We have some clients, we have some colleagues from Deloitte. And for me, innovation is about connecting dots. Today is just about that. Explore the dots, discover them, draw your own conclusions, connect them how you will. But for us, it's an exciting possibility to explore all of the new frontiers that we're going to hear about today and figure out how it applies to Deloitte, how it applies to all of our clients, connect them, and hopefully you'll see how it all comes together towards the end of the day.
So hi, everyone. Ben Jonash. I'm a partner within Doblin, and Doblin's our innovation and design practice, essentially founded 30 years ago with two pretty basic goals. One is to help clients imagine and build breakthroughs and help the companies become better innovators. But as we're about to go into all these different areas, I wanted to offer at least three learnings that we had that I think are going to be really relevant as we listen to all the different conversations. The first is around how do you get clear around your focus, intent, and ambition around innovation. No company lacks for a CEO being able to say, go innovate, we need you to innovate. What I'm hoping we can walk out of here, what are those next 2 or 3 sentences that actually give focus and purpose so that people that you want to marshal the energy in your company know what are those few things that you want to be great at versus telling everyone that we just want you to be better innovators. So that coming out of here today, I hope we have a few areas, each of you, that you can say, these are things that I want to make disproportional investment, I want to make bets in these areas. The second is the idea that there's a blessing and curse in the amount of technology that we're talking about. The blessing is a lot of new things that are newly possible. The curse is a bit of what I like to think of as a shiny object syndrome, where you start to say, well, what's the app for that? And what I'd like to make sure that we appreciate is as we look at all the different technology, equally look at what is the broad spectrum of how innovation can happen. And we talk a lot at Doblin around the 10 types of innovation that in particular represents product innovation and technology innovation is hugely important. Equally important is the idea of what is the implication on things that you structure internally. So your business model, your process, how you think about the inside of your organization, that is a source of innovation. As well as the customer, what is the implication of how you may take this technology through a new channel, a different branding, a different way of creating a customer experience. None of this matters if you don't have engagement. A lot of what we're going to be talking about in healthcare is actually how do you make sure people engage and change behaviors. So focusing equally on the technology as well as the customer experience and your business model is something we should all be thinking about as we hear all these different types of breakthrough areas. The third is to take head on the myth that innovation is a lack of having creativity in your organization. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's a lack of having a discipline and approaching it as something that you can do repeatedly and more effectively. I know many of you in your organizations have started to put in place an innovation capability and think of it as a way that there is a discipline of knowing how to do things such as prototyping earlier, getting things earlier in the hands of your customers, bringing deep and unconventional insights versus just asking your customers to tell you what they want. These are all things that are secrets of innovation that are about the discipline. And I hope as you take forward these ideas, you can bring that forward into your company. So with that, I'll get out of the way and I'll let a lot more exciting people talk about what's changing in the world.
Maybe.
Thank you, Ben. And I'd like to introduce Monte Stettin. Without his work, we wouldn't all be here today. So Monte and I had a chance encounter in LA, and LA being LA, his people called my people, which is me, and we got together for lunch one day, and great things have ensued since, and I've greatly benefited from his wisdom and your friendship. Thank you, Monte, for putting all this together.
Thank you.
And I'll turn it over to you to introduce the program and our speakers.
Sure. So first of all, thanks all for coming. We have a group of folks who will, I think, hopefully stretch everybody's thought processes a little bit about what the conventional wisdom is and what's going on. As Ben pointed out briefly, and in this film, what I find very interesting is when I was a young executive running a small company, I was interviewed by a magazine, and they asked me a question, and I was really quite naive. So the question I was asked was, how long have you been thinking out of the box? And I answered, what's a box? And I wasn't being insincere or coy. I actually didn't know people thought in boxes. Equally, it's a very interesting exercise because we were talking about dots here today. And one of the things that's quite interesting is if you're busy looking at one dot on a piece of paper, you will focus on the dot. Most people will. They won't focus on everything around the dot. And so what happens is people are not necessarily always geared by instinct, by neurons and all kinds of other things to look at things, and sometimes in a very holistic way or in an abstract way. And I think that that's extremely important. For what I see as an outsider to your industry is that we are not only standing literally at the precipice of a revolution in technology and an industry that is going to be greater, faster, more frightening, and more exciting than any other time in the history of our people since the Industrial Revolution. And what is going on is powerful and dangerous and exciting, because deployment of these technologies in and of itself is not necessarily a solution. Without getting into too much detail, the health insurance business, the healthcare business now are all chasing innovation concepts, technology concepts, and trying to find ways to figure out, especially since the ACA has gotten involved, how to drive down cost, how to create new metrics and bases for what's going to stop being a payment model that's based on service, but rather a payment model that is based on value. And the big interesting questions I see there excuse me, are who's going to take the risk? How does the risk get apportioned? What's going to start changing? How is it going to change? What happens to doctors in this process? As AI starts to get involved, what happens there? Are doctors going to be replaceable by a Watson that comes up with a diagnosis faster than they possibly can, just as they've been winning at Jeopardy and chess? What happens to attorneys? What happens to a lot of people who suddenly become vaporized, and a lot of businesses that become vaporized? So what I would say to you is, first, that if anybody in the room who is old enough to remember these companies was told 20 years ago to invest in Kodak, to invest in Polaroid, invest in Xerox, invest in US Steel, and invest in GM, and if I told you, don't do that, it's a bad idea, guys, you'd throw me out of the room. You'd say, what a moron, what an imbecile, how could he possibly think this way? And yet all of those companies got vaporized, principally because they weren't looking at what was happening around them. In the case of the American automakers, they kept on making the same product, blithely thinking that they would dominate the world product forever. The Japanese came along very quietly, refined their processes, made a better car, faster, quicker, better, deployed robotics in a way that nobody was doing in the United States, and suddenly, years later, GM is in bankruptcy. GM, what's good for America and is good for General Motors, gone. Kodak, comparable story. For years, dominated everything. Movies are now distributed globally pretty much on hard drives. They don't send 10 film cans out anymore as they did in my early days working in that business. And that's a much more ecological solution as well. So they've been vaporized as well. And I think as we continue to look at what's happening in business, you will see that the lifetime of companies that are not dedicated truly to innovation within and without are going to disappear because their vulnerabilities, when you're managing businesses of large size and scale, it is very hard to be agile and nimble. Someone once described to me that changing the schedule of a television network's comedy series lineup was the equivalent of trying to push an oil tanker through a pylon course. And so making things move, stop, and go is extraordinarily difficult because of scale, because this thing is massive, because you need to get adoption across a huge enterprise. And so the only way you can do that, I believe, is to innovate, become nimble, and form small groups within larger groups, both internally and externally, and begin to develop a real cultural aspect that permeates everybody working in every part of your business, who is encouraged and incentivized to be creative and to think and to come up with solutions without fear of retribution if they don't work. There's a tremendous amount of criticism of the phrases that come out of Silicon Valley that people think are pat and facile, fail quick and often, embrace failure. I think those phrases are cute, but I think it's more about view these experiences as experiments, view these experiences as a continual research project that finally leads you to your goal, And you have to create, I think, within cultures, you have to create an absence of fear of retribution. If an employee within your organization comes up with an idea that doesn't work and doesn't get, after it's been funded, and the only way that I can see to do this, and perhaps others have other ideas, and I'm sure some of them will articulate them today, is that if we don't go about the business of incentivizing both the outside and the inside, if we don't go about the business of innovating by creating venture funds within large organizations that move nimbly, because if you're waiting for your investment banker to come to you with a deal, if you're waiting for Goldman to come to you with a new hot piece of technology, it's already 7 years old, it's ready to IPO, or it's ready to be acquired. So there's no risk in that investment. There's also very little reward because you've already got something that's mature and may crash anyway. May crash 2 years later. I think Quirky just collapsed, right? Everybody was lauding that company 2 years ago as the hottest, most innovative, rapid prototyping business in the world. They're gone. They're gone because they made too many bad decisions about what they were making. And so I think that when we start looking at this and looking at it organizationally, I think the drive has to be to have a truly dedicated department within your enterprise or organization that answers only to the CEO. Because if you don't do that, by the time you actually get someone to sign off on what you want to do, the opportunity's already gone. Or your competitors have already taken that opportunity and are going to beat you up with it and push you out of that marketplace. So I think people like Molly Coy, who have been involved with all kinds of translations and transfers of technology, has spoken about this far more times than I am today and far more articulately. But this is a true core belief on my part. And it starts at the C-suite. It's got to start there and come down, or it's got to, because you don't have, in a democratically organized business where the ideas are flowing from the bottom to the top, you don't have the opportunity to get the CEO's attention, and he ultimately is going to make any big or even small funding decisions that are going to have impact within the business. So I think that we need to look at that hard. I don't have answers, but I have questions, and questions that I think we ought to be asking ourselves as people, citizens, consumers, and the like. You know, one of these issues that I find compelling is that when we look at healthcare, healthcare in some ways is a lot like the book publishing business. The status quo is okay until it's broken, and then when it's really broken, there's a lot of scurrying and a lot of disbursement of funds and looking for solutions that is not necessarily even terribly organized. So I think that what we want to do today is talk about a few examples that I've experienced recently. 53 million people in this country are now part of the gig economy. I think you may have read Sarah Horowitz's op-ed piece in the New York Times. If you have, her solution was to look at 53 million people who are freelance workers, look at what their problems are, the fact that they don't have continuous employment, they don't get benefits, when they have a downtime, they're living on savings. And so she did something quite unique and innovative. She invented a thing called the Freelance Workers Union. And so she started enrolling freelance workers into a program. 53 million is a big chunk of our workforce today. I think that will grow. And turned around and said, we're going to now have our own healthcare system. We're now going to deal with the prescription people. We're going to deal with providers. And we're going to negotiate. And we're going to form a place where people can actually get healthcare. And that's what she's done. And it's continuing to gain traction. So why isn't Big Health looking at those issues and saying, if we've got 53 million potential clients that we're not getting, and we haven't figured out how to innovate a plan around them, then we're going to lose business. And if we continue to think that way and not look outside what's been up until now for the most part a B2B model, then we're also going to suffer. And we're going to suffer real pain. Because when I did my research, when I was asked to do this job, and I was very grateful for it because it gave me an opportunity to be highly educated by really smart people. The folks in this room who are going to speak to you have been my mentors, teachers, and friends for a while now. Sometimes we've even done business together. But they have all taught me what I've learned. And what Rajiv and Deloitte enabled me to do was take a very, very deep look over a number of months into what's going on in the healthcare business. I come out of the marketing and advertising business originally. And the thing that I think has gotten lost in the translation is a mandate and dictum, if you will, that comes out of Google, which is the user is always right. And in that process, they acknowledge that the customer has total power. In healthcare and in the health insurance business, we haven't had the same situation at all. What we've had instead is a lot of B2B businesses. My cousin happens to be one of the guys who manages a chunk of Express Scripts. And his first job when he worked at Medco was to go out and visit the Ladies Garment Workers Union. And he was told, he's an MD, a rather bright guy, and he was told, you go into the Ladies Garment Workers Union, don't screw it up, it was our first account. And he happened to walk in and meet these guys, and it so happened that our grandfather had been both an entrepreneur, failed a few times, also worked in, was a union member in the Ladies Garment Workers Union. And when he walked in, they said, are you in any relationship to this guy? And he said, yes, he was my grandfather. They said, he was a great guy, you got the business, don't worry. True story, real story. So where I think we need to start looking at things is what the user experience looks like, what kind of customer satisfaction is going on, because you now have people who are going to start looking at choices. And when they start looking at choices, I think the challenge is how do you make yourselves more attractive? How do you make yourselves the people who address their needs? How does the business transform itself from being somewhat faceless in terms of where empathy cuts in and how the customer relations experience exists? When I took a look at it, I was seeing people complaining viscerally about being put into phone chains, being denied, not having a chance, not getting beaten up so badly they didn't know what to do, which is ultimately not your goal. If you're going to try to think about how to create value for your business in the future and also not get devoured by nimble little people who start figuring out new ways to do things, 5 guys in a garage can put somebody out of business these days. The cost of entry is low. Sarah Horowitz invented this union. She's becoming someone who people are talking to. Half the senators we've got in the United States now and Hillary Clinton are flying to Silicon Valley to talk to people about the gig economy. I don't think that's going to stop. So we're going to have to look at different paradigms in terms of who the user is, how do you take care of them, how do you figure out a plan that is going to work for them, how do you work with providers to work with these folks, because there are going to be more and more of them. And without going into a seriously deep dive, Sarah Horowitz did that. As another innovator, a fellow named Joshua Bress, who I have the privilege to advise, who is the CEO of a charity called Global Strategies, which is a great charity. If you want to give them money, I'd be grateful. And what they do is treat people who are poor in remote parts of the world, and they deal with maternal health and pediatric health. And they found that there was a high incidence of infant mortality, no great surprise, in certain parts of Africa, a lot of parts of Africa. And Josh, being a serious pediatrician and ER guy and an obstetrician as well, said, what do we do instead? So he created an app that we helped him with, Jacqueline and I helped him with, and basically put together a tablet-based program that teaches anybody how to revive a blue baby and resuscitate them and keep them alive. It's simple animation. It's very simple in terms of how it's driven. It's basically a logic tree. That's if this, then that. It's not complex computing. So they finally finished this thing. They put it out on some Asus tablets. And I'm proud to say that in a remote part of South Africa, 4 babies are alive today who wouldn't be. And nurses who are in that room go around. They were so happy about this that they're part of their practice now that's been integrated is to dance around the room going 1, 2, 3, push, 1, 2, 3, push. And they've got a whole dance they do. And this is continuing and expanding. So we look at that as yet another opportunity, I think, where we can start educating people and use technology in different ways. AI is coming in a major way. The folks at USC have literally created avatars that are getting better responses than psychiatrists. They've pinpointed them with using the same technology that we're using in the movie business, and they are as real as they can possibly be. So the question now becomes for the healthcare industry, how can you take AI and avatars and start saving some real money? Because if people are feeling more comfortable giving their data to an avatar than a human being, then perhaps there's some wisdom in creating an avatar with an AI that takes medical histories twice as fast as anybody else and does things in that kind of way. What about other delivery systems? What about how you get people to and fro? Telemedicine is another easy one. In the case of Kaiser, which seems to have a very high level of satisfaction according to J.D. Power, almost 50% of their non-acute business is being done as basically a Skype call or a version of it. People in Dartmouth are now beginning to, with Dartmouth Hitchcock Plan, are beginning to look at integrative solutions where 6,000 people are being rolled out right now out of a total client population of 1.2. And they are being told, hey, you know what? We're going to give you these devices. You're going to take care of your vitals. And we are going to sort of rearrange our business a little bit like a home security business. We're going to have folks look at a screen who are highly qualified to monitor you, watch what's happening to you, and be proactive in your health, and call you when we notice your blood pressure's been up for 3 days in a row, or your blood sugar is high, or whatever's going on that we're getting as data from the flow. That's now beginning to roll out with, I think, 6,000 people this month. So that's where I think we're heading with all of this. But I think when you go back to this word innovation, you know, to sum this up, Tom Kelly and his brother David, who formed IDEO, said the first thing you do is open your eyes and look. And really just look. So I think there's a lot of jargon that's been evolving. Certainly the folks at Doblin, I think, have been in the vanguard of innovative thinking and quantifying it and qualifying it in ways that I think are quite brilliant. I'm not here to plug them. I truly believe this. However, I think that all of us need to inculcate the notion of creativity in all of our people, because it starts with creativity. It starts with the eye. There was an engineer at IBM who watched his daughter running. While he watched her running, he happened to notice that she ran in an ellipse. He designed the elliptical trainer. He sold it to Precor. He stopped working for IBM. So it's a simple observation. The fishing hook is a simple piece of innovation that changed the lives of everybody. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to address an unspoken need, and it has to be something that can be made, is creative and new and applicable, and then scalable if you want to scale it. I think those are the challenges that we're facing, and I think some of the obstacles are, as were pointed out very early in the Dot movie, are people who are entrenched in a profitable business are not exactly motivated to want to rock that boat. People who have shareholders who are happy with their returns are not in a hurry to go make a speech about patient and conscious capital. But it is my belief, Simon Mainwaring is a good friend. He wrote a best-selling book called We First, which is a re-examination of capitalism. And in looking at it, what he took a look at was branding. He's a branding guy. And he looked at who were responding to brands and buying products in a specific way. And what he discovered was that people with great CSR, like Tom's Shoes is an easy dumb model, were attracting clients in a way that other brands weren't. And the millennials weren't buying at all if they didn't feel that there was some good attached, some positive benefit attached to what they were doing and buying. So they're starting to use their buying power in different ways. The challenge for healthcare is going to be, you've got one group, my group, you know, who are aging baby boomers, getting ready to be a source of revenue, who have to be addressed one way. And then you've got all these young people who need to be served. And I think that's an enormous challenge. I have no answer. Okay? I think that's your job, but I think that's where we are. So, you know, in closing, you've got to look at, I think, totally new ways of not only bringing costs down so you can charge less, or at least charge the same and deliver more value, but also rethink how one markets to people, because you're not going to be marketing to the union. You're going to be marketing to me. You're going to be marketing to Walter, to Josh, to Jacqueline, to folks in this room in a totally different way, unless they're self-insured. So I think that the takeaway for me from all of this is to look at this revolution, but that tech by itself is not a solution. It's part of the solution. And without intelligent deployment, without the willingness to accept risk as a collateral force within your company, without the ability to not embrace failure, but view experiments and the ability to change what you're doing in a new way, then you will be static, there'll be stasis, and eventually someone will come along and you'll be like a company that used to sell a little yellow box with film inside of it. I'm hoping that these ideas are helpful. John Driscoll, who is heroic, has made it here today against all odds, and will come and talk to you momentarily about next generation in healthcare, which I think is one of the next great areas of innovation and opportunity for all of you. Thank you very much.